everyone, welcome to our special here on Modi Meets Trump. We're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. as we count down to the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump in a few hours from now. Ahead of that, Prime Minister Modi is going to be meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, and he's also going to be meeting with the Defense Secretary. Now, two issues that the Prime Minister himself has raised as areas of convergence and partnership are aviation and, of course, the defense sector. There's been a lot of buzz around both these areas. In fact, the Prime Minister, in his op-ed for the Wall Street Journal today, saying that India is an increasingly attractive aviation market. He's talked about 200 American-made aircraft joining the Indian private sector fleet. And of course, defense, we've already seen that big announcement coming in from the sidelines of the Paris Air Show, which is something that both sides are taking forward here in conversations, and that's the agreement between Lockheed Martin and Tata. Now, Boeing is another company that has been focusing in a big way on India, in a big way on Make in India specifically. They've signed a massive order with SpiceJet. In fact, the announcement of an additional fleet acquisition from Boeing, between SpiceJet and Boeing, came in from the sidelines of the Paris Air Show. Joining us now is the president of Boeing India, Pratyush Kumar. Pratyush, always a pleasure to have you on CNBC TV 18. Many thanks for joining us. What's your own take on the fact that the Prime Minister has decided to focus in his op-ed on aviation as a big area of opportunity and focus? The US-India Business Council is also setting up its first working group on civil aviation. How does that make you feel?
It's great to see that in his op-ed piece. Of course, the demographics and dynamics of India is such that aviation growth is an unstoppable force. We have seen double-digit growth, actually more than 20% growth in traffic in India for the last 3 years, and it's expected to be a secular trend for the for the foreseeable future. So given that 200 aircraft is just a start, it'll be a lot more than that, but good to see that in his op-ed.
So you're saying 200 aircraft is just the start. It's going to be a lot more than that. But let's talk specifics, and let me ask you about Boeing's plans for India. I was talking about the SpiceJet order. You've just signed an additional 20 with SpiceJet on the sidelines of the Paris Air Show, and this is for the Boeing 737 MAX 10. Take us through the deal with SpiceJet and where this now leaves things, because the number was, what, 200 odd aircraft for SpiceJet alone?
Right. So, as you know, at the Paris Air Show, SpiceJet made an announcement to commit 40 737 MAX 10. This is the largest of the 737 family aircraft. Incredible aircraft, incredible economics for our customer. So it's 20 additional and 20 conversion of the 737 MAX 8 order. So it's exciting for us. It's a very strong endorsement of our product by one of our very important customers. So good to see that. And this is just a continuation of the announcement that SpiceJet made earlier this year in New Delhi, when they had announced a pretty substantial order for 737s.
So given what you are seeing in the Indian market now, and I know that you've always been a believer in the Make in India story as well, what does this mean from a civil aviation perspective for Boeing in India?
It clearly demonstrates the strength of the sector. As you know, the civil aviation came up with a new civil aviation policy. Very encouraged to see that they're focusing on the regional connectivity scheme, which will further turbocharge the growth of the civil aviation sector. So this is a kind of voting with their wallets, as they say, customers, on the strength of the sector. So very good news for the sector.
Let me talk to you about defense, because this is the other big area of opportunity and collaboration that both leaders perhaps will talk about today. We've seen the strategic partnership policy, which was long pending, finally being announced by the Indian government. Do you like what you've seen? Are there any concerns that you have with the partnership policy?
It's a great step forward. We were eagerly awaiting to see the details of the policy. It's good to see it's finally published. It's important that the process has been laid out. And as we follow the process, the transparency of the process will help us achieve the end results we're looking to do. Of course, we're very interested in participating the fighters for the Navy, which is the carrier-borne fighter aircraft, for which there's RFI is out there for that, as well as the 2-engine aircraft for the Air Force. And we are looking forward to participating through this SP model process going forward.
Speaking of, bringing on board local partners, how do you see all of that working out now that the details of the strategic partnership policy are out?
It's a very good question. We have scanned the entire landscape. We have talked to almost 400 Indian suppliers, almost 160 of them in our supply chain today. So we know the landscape very, very well. So as the strategic partnership model evolves, we will work with our Indian partners to create the full ecosystem for building a fighter aircraft in the country. It's not just about one partner. Of course, the SP, the strategic partner itself, is important, but that's just one element of the overall ecosystem. When you're looking at building something like F-18 Super Hornets, it will take hundreds of Indian suppliers to build that aircraft, right? And of course, at the end of the day, there will be a strategic partner which does the final assembly, testing and certification. Underneath that, there'll be tiered structure of suppliers in the country. That's what we're working on. That's the heavy lifting.
You're absolutely right about the need to create that entire ecosystem, but zeroing in on the strategic partner itself?
Well, I mean, we have not made a commitment on this one. We've been talking to lots of Indian companies, and of course, part of this will be is part of our game is to follow the lead of the Indian government. They have set down a process for strategic partnership, so we don't want to jump ahead of that. We're going to follow the process and be ready to announce when they are ready to buy.
Any more joint ventures that we can expect? You've already inked one, but any more joint ventures that we can expect from Boeing in India?
Well, there's nothing that I'm ready to announce right now, but of course we're excited about the joint venture we have Tata's. The factory, we broke the ground on that last year, ready to production later this year. So a very important step for us. It's going to make the fuselage for Apache helicopters. And as we think about the upcoming opportunity for fighter aircrafts, it will entail multiple joint ventures, supply chain partners, teaming agreements. So a massive slew of things will be underway to make that happen.
You just talked about the Apache and your partnership with Tata's. Just ahead of this visit, there's been the announcement of the Lockheed-Tata partnership for the F-16. How does Boeing read this, specifically in the context of this Make in India versus Make in America and the contradictions, if any, at all?
I mean, if at all, that partnerships highlights the clear and present opportunity in India. It highlights that Make in India and Make in America are not necessarily at odds. It's not a zero-sum game. It's accretive, it's net positive for both the countries. So in that sense, it's really a proof point that, hey, this is a model which can actually work.
So in terms of the quantum of investments into India, in creating the ecosystem, the supply chain, etc., what can we expect from Boeing over the next few years?
Well, if the fighter campaign actually comes to fruition, we're talking about billions of dollars in manufacturing investment. That goes a long way. I mean, creating the full ecosystem is a substantial endeavor. It requires not only building the final assembly plant, but also creating a supply base of tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. And that's a substantial investment.
What is the current sourcing that Boeing does out of India?
We are excited to say that we have more than quadrupled our sourcing in the last 3 years. By the end of this year.
The value?
By the end of this year, our total cumulative sourcing will be touching close to $1 billion.
$1 billion?
Yeah.
Okay. And any challenges in being able to achieve that number? Here yesterday when the Prime Minister met with business leaders of US companies, the overarching theme continued to be issues around the ease of doing business. Specifically from your point of view, any unaddressed concerns that you would like the government to facilitate?
Well, I think the government is doing a lot of right things. For example, the GST is a step in the right direction. It certainly helped the movement of goods and services more smoothly across the country, which is a very important part of our sourcing strategy to make sure that we bring multiple suppliers together around sub-assemblies and subsystems. So that's very important steps. I think, making electronics or digitization of processes is a very, very important step for ease of doing business. So for example, one of the things they do is offset management. If they can apply e-governance, electronic submission of offsets, that'll help. That's the next step that can evolve from the efforts to improve ease of doing business. But so far, we've seen pretty encouraging signs.
I know that skills has been an issue that your sector has been facing issues with in India specifically, and companies like yours are also partnering with the government to try and ensure that we have a skilled pipeline of talent. Where do things stand on that front?
Well, I think the key to success for aerospace manufacturing is skill and scale. Scale comes with a large
Orders,
right? And skill is something we got to build, from the ground up. So we, along with others, are investing in skills across the whole spectrum, from frontline factory workers to high-end research and development, right? So we have programs not only for suppliers, but also for SMEs who can be ready to participate in the global supply chain. Very important factor. It's something that we are doing at our own level, but also government is looking at very carefully to, in a sustainable way basis, to expand that across the whole spectrum. One of the things we talked about, for example, in the civil aviation sector, is the lack of availability of trained or type-rated aircraft maintenance engineers. Although there are lots of so-called AME trained engineers, but they're not type-rated. So we're discussing with the government potentially creating a finishing school of sorts to get the skills, get the full, final skills, the last mile connectivity to complete the skills of those AMEs so they can be employed.
So this is with the central government or any state government in specific?
This is Civil Aviation Ministry,
Okay.
partner with them. But of course, at the end of the day, we'll partner with our airline partners because they're the ones that will employ those AMEs.
Both leaders will like to focus on the fact that they're creating jobs in their respective countries. I mean, President Trump continues to focus on jobs, and that's what Prime Minister Modi will have to do as well. So given the kind of investments that you've made, given the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers that you've been able to bring into the Boeing fold, directly and indirectly, what is the kind of employment that you've helped create in India as well as in the US on account of the dealings with India, if there is a number?
Well, I mean, there is the number per se, but you can imagine with more than 200 aircrafts on civil aviation side and pretty sizable order on the defense side, we're talking about tens of thousands of US jobs that order supports in here. At the same time, our sourcing activity in India also creates employment there. So in that sense, we are growing the pie on both sides. So it's all fueled by the incredible demand we have in India, which is sustaining jobs in the US and also creating jobs in India.
One final question, Prat, before I let you go. There may be concerns that the Indian government has chosen to go the G2G route as far as some large orders are concerned, for instance, on the Rafael side. How is the private sector in the defense space looking at the fact that the Indian government may choose to go the G2G route again?
Well, I think that's a prerogative the governments have, is that for strategic reasons, at some point of time, they decide to go G2G. Other times, they do competitive procurement. We have done both. So, for example, our C-17 was a G2G FMS deal, but other systems and aircraft we sold, like P-8, Chinook, and Apache was a hybrid deal, has been more direct commercial sale. So we're comfortable with both models, and it really depends on the comfort of the government, which way they want to go.
So what's the expectation from the Modi-Trump visit?
I think the expectation has been outlined very nicely in the op-ed piece that the Prime Minister wrote. It's about convergence, it's about relationship, it's about strategy. Transactions happen the strength of relationship and strategy, and it doesn't happen in a defined time frame. So we're very excited to see that.
Always a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18 from Washington, D.C., Pratyush.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, that's the view here from Boeing India on the opportunities in the defense as well as the aviation space, both areas that the Prime Minister has decided to focus on and emphasize on ahead of his meeting with President Trump. Our coverage will continue here on CNBC TV 18. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with you.